It was February 28, 1982. Gail and Bergstrand were quietly asleep in their home when the wife woke up to a sound quite unfamiliar to her. She was in her bed, with her eyes open. She could not understand what was going on. Only she could remember was that she heard a loud thud. She waited for a while, confused at what to do with it. Since it was loud, she realized something must be wrong at 2:30 a.m. She woke her husband up and told him about the incident. But her husband, who was in deep sleep, did not give much attention to this and replied, "Mr. Harmon at the most would have fallen from the stairs," and laughed it off. She did not like this attitude of her husband, but she did not know what to do. She was awake for a while thinking when finally, after a few minutes, she went to sleep. Just an hour later at 3:30 a.m. she heard a knock at their door. She sensed something was wrong since no one had ever shown up at this time at their house. She again woke her husband up and they went to open the door. The couple was shocked to find Mrs. Melinda Harmon soaked up in blood, showing up at their door. She seemed not in her senses and blood covered her face, from a small wound on her cheek. She was frantic and asked them to call the police. She said some people had attacked David. The police arrived just shortly after receiving the call. They tried to calm Melinda down. The police went to their house and found David Harmon soaked in blood. It seemed like he had been bludgeoned to death. The face and front were almost crushed by the attacks. The forensics report stated that David had been hit at least 12 times. David Harmon was born on January 3, 1957, and was raised suburb of Rochester, New York. He was born in a religious family, and his parents also worked at the Church of Nazarene. Since his childhood, David has been an intelligent boy and has won several awards. He would always carry a book with him related to the Nazarene school of thought and was quite famous among people there. Being the only son of his parents, he was not only liked by his family but everyone around him. He was just 15 when he first met Melinda, who would become the love of his life at a summer camp of Nazarene Church. Even though Melina was not so good academically, neither did she have plans other than finding herself a suitable husband, yet she left a mark on his heart. David approached Melinda, and they became friends. But Melinda would act strange as she would call on people, and even her friends who would violate any of the church's rules. She was an insecure kind of a person, yet it did not bother David, and their friendship eventually led to love between them. Melinda was the daughter of a high-ranking Nazarene church official, and was born and raised in Syracuse. Since they both belonged to a religious family, they knew if they wanted to take things forward, they needed to get married. They convinced their families and got married at the young age of just 20 in 1977. This marriage brought happiness to the family, and the two families bonded well. Melinda's father even got promoted and transferred to Olathe, Kansas just after their marriage. They also moved to the place where her father was transferred and started living in Melinda's father's duplex. David, who was serious with his career since the start, joined a bank and started working as a loan officer. He had a handsome salary package of $13,000 a year. Melinda's father arranged a job for her at Mid-America Nazarene University. She worked as a secretary of the university's dean of students. The family was quite perfect, attractive, and affordable. They made friends quite easily and soon became quite known in the new place. Among all other friends was Mark Mangelsdorf, who was a student body president at the university. Mark and Melinda would have frequent interactions at the university, which ultimately led to their friendship. She also introduced him to David, and the two went along quite well, to the extent that they became close friends. With time, David lost interest in his job and would not be focused on it. He also developed an image of an unprofessional person and was warned many times for his habit of playing practical jokes in the office. It was because of his wife that he lost interest in work and would often spend time with Mark playing racquetball. The small town of a very few neighbors told the police that they would find Mark's car outside the Harmon's residence. It was in fact that the couple spent more time with their new friend. With time, David also got into the unhealthy habit of eating excessively and ultimately put on a lot of weight. One other thing that the conservative town of Olathe found odd was the close bond between Melinda and Mark. They would often be at work, and in the passing gossip suggested she keep some distance from him, as it does not suit a married woman to share an intimate bond with a student-cum-friend. On February 28, 1982, asked Melinda about the incident. She put it this way. She said the couple was sleeping peacefully in the bedroom when she woke up to an unusual sound. When she woke up, she found two black men with a crowbar and found David covered in blood and unconscious. She said she was stunned and was dragged by the two men to the living room. She also said she heard one of them saying to the other, "I think you hit him hard. Must have killed him." She told the police that the assaulters asked her for the bank keys where David worked, and when they got them from her, they knocked her out by hitting her in the face. It was after an hour when she woke up and found the men had left, and David injured, or dead, she was not sure. She ran to her neighbors and called for help. She also called Mark at that time of the night. When he showed up, the police found something suspicious about him. The police and the forensics team searched the house, but they found nothing that could help take the case forward. There was no weapon of assault, no sign of forced entry, nothing being stolen, no finger or footprints, and not even a hair. This raised suspicion as if the crime scene was cleaned up. Also, the police quickly sent the force to David's bank and waited for the suspects, but none showed up. A strange yet intriguing thing was with Mark. When he arrived at the crime scene, it seemed like he had taken a shower at such a late time in the night. Another inconsistency that the police found was that Melinda was sleeping right beside David, and her pillow was soaked in blood, yet her nightgown had a very small stain of blood. The investigators also noticed that Melinda had just a small bruise on her face, while making someone unconscious for almost an hour. This was not something one could believe. The police had their suspects and they interrogated them. Mark denied having taken a shower and denied any such blame on him. However, after a series of interrogations, he admitted that he and Melinda spent the day before the murder together. They went for a walk and also stopped at Mark's apartment. When the police asked if they stopped there for some intimate activity, they both became defensive and said they had not ever kissed each other. Romantic intimacy is way beyond it. There were so many inconsistencies in Melinda's story that the police did not want to buy it. The police suspected the story of the two black men, and it seemed illogical to them, since the vault of the bank was time-locked too. However, they did not have much evidence against Melinda. The police had their prime suspect now, and it was Mark. They also traced him and found something that would keep him under observation. They found blood on the carpet of his apartment, and also found his fingerprints on the back door of the Harmon's residence. They also found signs of human blood in his vacuum cleaner. Mark's neighbors also informed police about his unusual activity of running a vacuum cleaner at such a late time in the night. However, the forensics of that time were not so developed, and the claim that the blood belonged to David could not be testified. This meant that there was not so much evidence to take the case forward. The police had to resume the case based on lack of evidence. Life slowly became normal, and the neighborhood found a sudden coldness in the relationship between Mark and Melinda. She did not stay there much longer, and just after a week, she went back to her parents in Ohio. Mark also went on his journey. He did his MBA from Harvard University and became a successful business executive. He became a multimillionaire and married to have 3 children. He later got divorced in 1997 and got married to another lady 2 years later. He started living in a $1.3 million house. Melinda, on the other hand, also married a successful dentist. Ironically, his name too was Mark Reich. In 1986, she got settled and lived a normal life with 2 children. The two families seemed unaware of each other and lived happily. All was going well until many advancements in modernization followed the new century. The 21st century, in almost all the fields. Everything was getting developed with every passing day. This was the time when the forensics field was revolutionized. In 2001, the Johnson County Crime Lab got upgraded, and this summer they thought of something that would bruise many old injuries. The department wanted to test these advancements and asked the investigators to dig up some unsolved cases due to a lack of not-so-proper forensic services. They wanted to dig up some old cases involving DNA. That is when, through a detailed search and study, the investigators got to the case of David Harmon almost 20 years later. The case was handed over to the 2 most competent investigators of the department, Detective Bill Walls and Steve James. They went through the details of the case and studied it thoroughly. Finally, on December 17, 2001, they decided to reopen the case. They went all over from Kansas to Ohio, making a 700-mile trip. Melinda, a mother of 2 kids, had long forgotten whatever happened 19 years ago. She was not aware of what was about to happen. She could have never imagined it. When the doorbell rang, she thought this must be someone regular. Little did she know that a 19-year-old event would be waiting for her to be reopened and haunt her. She was shocked when the detectives asked her about the incident that happened around 2 decades ago. She tried to manage herself and agreed to the interrogation. She told the story to the investigators, but she knowingly or unknowingly did something that would have some severe consequences. If you are enjoying the story, make sure you hit the subscribe button and get connected to us. Also press the bell icon so you can get regular updates. If you like this story, please hit the like button too. The detectives noticed that the story she told her did not match the one she told 19 years ago. She said previously that 2 black men attacked David, but this time she said there was only 1 white person. This raised some eyebrows. The police got suspicious when she missed some other major points too. They decided to further dig into this case. Melinda, being emotionally volatile and not so logical, got manipulated when the detective confronted her bluntly. They said it was either her or Mark. Nobody else seemed to be so close to the evidence they had. She quickly confessed that she had had feelings for Mark, and that she had a sense of him falling for her too. She also said she always thought it was Mark. She said she sensed the feeling of the person being Mark. She recognized him. She stopped here and said nothing else. She wanted to crack up a deal with them, but the investigators seemed in no mood to do so. They waited for the results of the DNA match. The result indicated a great probability of the blood found on Mark's carpet to be that of David's. In December 2003, they were finally in the position to take this case for prosecution and charge both of them for first-degree murder. Mark bringing an influential person was not an easy catch, so the police knowingly focused more on Melinda, as she was fragile in this case. After almost a year and a half, the police finally arrested Mark on April 8, 2005. However, using his intellect and influence, he was released on bail just a week later for a good sum of $300,000. The trial of Melinda started on April 11, 2005. The prosecution blamed her for having a romantic relationship with Mark, evident from the cards and letters exchanged between them. She also testified in the court that the assaulter was none other than Mark. The prosecution, however, argued and blamed her for being involved in this too. They argued that since the Church of Nazarene does not allow divorce, she preferred being a widow to be with Mark. The trial went on for some time until the court found her guilty of first-degree murder of David Harmon. She could not believe this. She was stunned at this verdict of the court. Here the prosecution played another game with her. They allowed her to downgrade her conviction. They asked her to testify against Mark so she could plead for a second-degree murder. It was far better than the charges she had been convicted of. She agreed and did testify before the court. Since the evidence against Mark was not enough to take the case forward, this statement of Melinda's was critical. She told the court what the truth was to save her neck. She testified that she saw Mark buy a crowbar just a week before the murder. She also told the court that Mark killed David to get with her. She apologized to David's family, in which only an old father was alive. David's heartbroken mother had just died before the trial. The old man sought justice from the court. The court asked Mark if he wanted to plead guilty for the second-degree murder, which he accepted, and the court finally announced their final verdict. In 2006, they both were sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, with an eligibility for parole after 5.5 years. The old man could finally be at rest. The two of them did apply for parole in 2011, but it was denied. However, Melinda had been released in 2016 while Mark was conditionally released in April 2010. People have mixed views regarding this case. Some argue that this was not enough sentence for a case that remained unsolved, and the convicts roamed around freely for almost 20 years, while others argue that this sentence was justified since there had been not much evidence. However, John Harmon, the father of David Harmon, said in a statement that it hurts him to find out the murderer of his only son would be freed soon. This statement he gave just a few weeks before Mark's bail. The prosecution, however, says, be it partial, but justice was delivered, which otherwise would not have had. Even though they spent very little time in prison, it is better than not spending even an hour had they not made a deal with the convicts. What do you say about this case? Was the justice delivered? Was the deal justified? Please do let us know about your opinion in the comment section. If you like our videos, please stay tuned for more.